Hey everyone, welcome to Wolpin's Gaming Den. Today we'll be covering the tutorial for the game Garum, designed by Ricardo Jorge Gomez with artwork by Pedro Soto and published by Pythagoras Games. Garum is a family-weight Euro-style game expected to be played in roughly 30 to 40 minutes and can be played by anywhere between 2 to 4 players. In this game, you are a merchant or producer of sorts of garum. Garum is a very highly desired and popular fish sauce back in the day in Rome, and you're looking to be the best one out there in the market and try to accomplish that by getting the most points possible. Over the course of the game, you'll be laying out different tiles in these different locations and sending your workers out with the intent of trying to have the most points for the rows and columns that you have these guys out for. That may not make a lot of sense to you right now, but hopefully it will by the end of the video. So let's crack into it. We'll start by looking at how the setup for the game works. Then we'll go into what a turn structure could look like. We'll do that by looking at a couple of examples of moves as well, just to make sure that things are clear. And then we'll talk about a couple of variants that the game comes with at the very end, as well as some of the minor rule differences if you're playing with 2 to 3 players. So over here, we have the game set up for 4 players, which is sort of like where the core rules reside. To do this, you will set up the game board at the center in between all the players. Now, this is a double-sided board. This side is labeled Troya. The other side has a different name, and the other side has some of these locations blocked off. So it's a slight variant on this one. For the purposes of the teach, we'll cover it using this one, and then we'll talk about the differences on the other side later on. So once you have it face side up, put down all the individual scoring markers on the side on 0 over here. That's the scoring marker going around that side. Next, give each player their different components in their color. So they will basically collect this scoring tile, which gives them a sense of how much they're going to score at the end of the game based on certain conditions. You'll put this off to the side. You'll pick up the scoring token as well. So whenever your score crosses 25 or 50, this will then come into effect. So this is going to go off to the side as well. Each player will then collect the meeples in their color. There are 6 meeples in all, 5 small ones and 1 large one. So you'll take all 6 and put it in front of you. You will also collect all these different tiles in your player color as well. So this, for example, is for the red players, so they have all of their tiles. This will be shuffled and then randomly put in a face down draw pile, and you will put it basically in front of the player. So all 4 players are basically getting the same components and whatnot. Next up, determine a start player, and you can do this either randomly or using any other condition that's comfortable, with your group, and that player will get this marker with them. The marker moves over the course of the game, so every round the next player in clockwise order is the start player, so this does not stay constant with whoever the start player is at the start of the game. And then the last thing you want to do is you have these tokens over here, and these look like coins at a quick glance, but they have a number printed on one of their sides, and this is a unique number in all of these. So this has 11 printed on it. This has 4 printed on it, and so on and so forth. Basically, the way that this works is you will shuffle this, put it again in a face down draw pile, and this is important because at the start of every round you will draw one of these, and that will tell you which square you guys are playing in. So we'll come to that in a minute as well. And with that, you're mostly done with the setup. The last thing you want to do before you start up the game is each player will draw 4 of these into their hand. So let's say we're representing the red player as an example. So I'm going to draw 4 off the top of the draw pile and take it in my hand. Now this is going to be private information for me, so I can always see what I have in my hand, but I do want to keep it secret from my other players. So with that, once everybody has drawn their 4 tiles, you're ready to start the game and ready to start playing. The turn structure is a fairly straightforward one. On your turn, you can go through 3 different steps. Step 1 and step 3 are optional. Step 1 and step 3 are mandatory. Step 2 is optional. So let's have a look at what these steps are. So you're always doing at least 2 actions basically, and the third action is an optional one should you choose to do it. So before the start of the round, the first thing that you will do is the start player will basically take this token, flip it face over, we'll look at the number printed on it, and that tells everybody the location that they're playing in. So as we had seen earlier, the very top value one here is 11. So we'll look at the board, and we can see that the number 11 square is right over here. Each of these squares has 4 squares within it, so that's important to keep in mind. Each of these smaller squares is basically where you're putting down one of your tiles. So each square has 4 tiles that will go into it, one for each player color, and then the same process will repeat for all the different squares in there. So the first one we want to start off with is 11, and let's say if red were the start player, I can now have a look at my tiles in my hand, and then what I will do is I can choose any one and I will put it face up on one of these 4 squares. I choose the orientation it goes in, so I can do it like this. I can rotate any which way I want. I can go here, or I can possibly go here. That's the first thing you're doing on your turn. The next action that you can do, and this is a mandatory action, the next action that you can do on your turn is you can send out one of your meeples, and that can be the small one or the large one, and you can send them to any row or column section for the location that you just placed. So as an example, if this is the section that we're working with, there are 4 of these spots over here. So each of these squares corresponds to 4 of these spots vertically and 4 spots horizontally. And this is where sort of like your meeples can go over the course of the game. So if you're playing with square number 11, you can send your meeple after placing this to one of these 4 spots or one of these 4 spots. We'll talk about why you want to do that a little later on, but generally that's an option that you can do on this turn. You cannot send your meeple to a spot where you haven't placed a tile. So I cannot go here, for example, because obviously the tile, the square that we're playing with is not in this particular row. I cannot go here. Again, the one that we're playing with is not in that particular column. It's either this 4 or this 4. And then the third thing that you will do on your turn is you will basically draw 1 from your face down draw pile, so that you always have a hand of 4. So that's roughly the flow structure that you're going with. Now, a few things will happen as you're going through the turn, but let's quickly just recap. So you have those 3 steps. The first action, placing down a tile, is mandatory. The second action, placing a meeple on a corresponding spot, is optional. This you do not have to do, but you have 6, so you want to do it at least, you want to do it 6 times over the course of the game. Once a meeple has been placed on a particular spot, they don't move. That's the optional step. The third step that you're doing is you're drawing a tile back into your hand, and that is again a mandatory action. So that's where the 2 mandatory actions come in, and the third optional action comes in. Now that we understand the flow, let's have a look at the individual actions in a little bit more detail. So when you're placing down these tiles, you will notice that some of these spots have these symbols on them. Whenever you see this symbol with 4 of the different types of fish together, that's a wild symbol, and that covers the whole smaller square that you can put it on. And then over here you have some of the specific types of fish, and that's going to be like that will correspond to one of the smaller squares within this square itself. So if you're putting down a tile and one of the colors of the fish that you're putting down covers the exact one that you're putting it down over. So here's the blue fish on the top left corner in this square. And if I put this one down here in this orientation so that my blue fish covers this blue fish, that will score me 2 points. And I will get those 2 points right away. So I will move up 2 on this point track over here like so. If I were to do red over here, same thing, that gets me 2 points as well. If I were to cover up a wild symbol, again, doesn't matter what fish you're putting on it, what orientation it goes in or anything of that sort, that will just by default get you 1 point. So that's the key rule you want to keep in mind when you're placing down different tiles, is the points that you will score as well. And this point is immediate, and that's the only way you can earn points with your action immediately within the game. Couple of things to keep in mind with regard to placement of your meeples on the board. So let's say if I had placed my meeple over here, again, as per the rules description, we had said that we can go to one of these 4 spots, or we could go to one of these 4 spots. So that's great, and you can choose to do that or you can choose not to do that, and that's fine. The key rule you want to remember with this particular step is obviously over the course of the game you'll be covering up this spot, this spot, this spot, and so on and so forth. If you're working with the last square, and by last square I mean this larger one, in a particular row or a particular column, you cannot put down your meeple at that point. So you can only do it if the first square in that row or column is being played, or the second or the third one is getting played. When it's time for the very last square in a particular row or column to be played, you're not eligible to put down your meeple over there. And that's because when you're putting your meeple down, your meeple obviously represents your particular color. And what you're really looking to do is you want to have, so let's say if I were to put this down here, you want your meeple to see as many of your color as possible in that particular row or in that particular column, depending on where you put this guy down. So if this was my very first move and I put this guy down here and then I put my meeple over here like this, he can see in this particular column one red fish. I mean, it's a crab, but let's just say it's a fish for simplicity. You can see one red fish over here. So that is going to be worth a certain number of points at the end of the game, potentially. Over the course of the game, of course, there's going to be more tiles that are going to be put out. So let's say like this, maybe like this. There might be some like this. And then as you can see, this will, of course, now start having visibility of more and more of your color in that particular row or column. And that's a key way in which you will score points. Which will happen at the end of the game itself. So you want to keep that in mind. And the reason why, of course, the rule is stopping you from doing it on the very last square that's getting played is because by that point, you already know what the row or the column looks like. So the rule wants you to take a little bit of chance on a particular row or column while, it's still in play, so to speak. So you're putting down your meeple, and then you want to have visibility of as many of your color as possible in that point. And then, of course, with the third step, that's a pretty simple one. You're always drawing back one tile into your hand. So you always start your turn with one tile in hand, as it were. And that's pretty much what your turn order looks like. It's a fairly light and breezy game to get into, with most of your strategy coming in from placement and sort of like the spatial aspect of how the game board looks like. Remember, you're earning points immediately if you ever cover up the spots that give you points. One for the specific fish, 2 points for the specific fish and 1 for the wild. And then at the end of the game, you will score points based on this tile. So this is a good time to come back and have a look at this. The game will continue in this fashion until the entire board is filled up. So you have, as you can see, there are basically 16 squares over here. In the full game, each player gets 16 tiles. So, with 4 colors, each one of these squares is covered by each of the colors. So you'll have 16 tiles placed all throughout. So you're basically getting 16 turns over the course of the game. The game ends once all of this is completed, at which point you then start adding up points based on this particular table. So you might be a certain way up on that track, wherever you are, and then you will look at this one. So what this basically tells you is for your smaller meeples, you want to have visibility of at least a certain number of fish if you can start scoring points. So the first one says 4 or less. So if you have a meeple that's placed out and they do not get to see more than 4, so either 4 or 3 or 2 or 1 or whatever in that particular row or column, you're losing points. The smaller meeple will lose you 1 point and the larger meeple will lose you 2 points. Important to keep in mind from a points perspective, the large meeple is always worth twice as much as the small one. So, and you can see that from the table right over here. If you have visibility of at least 5 of your own color in that row or column, the small meeple will get you 1 point, the large meeple will get you 2 points. And as you can see, it then starts ramping up, going all the way to 9 and above. So if you can have a small meeple with visibility of 9 or more of your color, which in this case is red, you will score 11 points for the small one. And if it's the large meeple that gets to see that huge row or column of your own color, you're scoring 22 points. Each player will evaluate this particular sheet for their color. So, everybody is going through the same process. As you can see, everybody has the same table in front of them. So you'll add up all of those points. And then at the end of the game, whoever has the most points from that is the winner. And that pretty much is it for Garum. That's roughly the rules for a full 4-player game using this side up. Now, I'm going to quickly move these aside because I want to show you what the other side looks like, and then we'll talk about the variants and how the 2 and the 3-player games work. So if I flip this over, you can see that the other side is labeled Palo Claudia. I mean, the name is there just for flavor purposes. You have the same scoring track, the same placement rules and whatnot. But the key difference you will notice here is that there are 4 locations, these 4, that are blocked off. So basically, if you're playing with this side up, what you will do is you're going to take tokens from this pile over here that correspond to these. So the rule book actually tells you which ones to take out, and I'll have a screenshot for that down here right now. And so you're going to take those out of the game from this particular pile over here. You will also remove a certain number of your tiles, because again, you're no longer playing 16 tiles over the course of the game. You're actually playing 12. So 4 of these will be taken out, and which 4 need to be taken out is again in this screenshot right over here. So you take all of those out and then you proceed with the game, and the rules for the game work otherwise pretty much the same way for this particular setup. The only difference again is because of the fact that you don't have 4 full squares in a particular column. At the start of the game, when you're drawing your hand size, you're not drawing 4 tiles, you're drawing 3 tiles instead. So that's one difference. And the other difference is in terms of when you can put down your meeple on a particular square. If you remember on the other side, we had said if you're ever competing for the 4th square, like 3 of the squares in a row or column have been completed and now you're playing on the 4th one, you cannot put your guy out. Because there are 3 squares in rows and columns over here, you cannot do that same thing for the 3rd square because there is no 4th square at this point, right? So keep that in mind. Those are the key differences for this side up. And otherwise, you can then play for this one. This makes for a shorter, tighter game, whereas the other one is a more expanded, fuller game, if you want to think of it in those terms. Now, let's talk about a couple of the differences for 2 players and 3 players. Now, as you may have been able to tell, in all of the games, all of these colors need to be used for the board to be completed. So if you're playing a 2-player game, basically the way that that will work is the rules are pretty much identical, the same, except each player now takes up 2 colors. So, you know, one player might control these 2 and the other player might control these 2. Turn structure and everything and rules work pretty much the same way, except on each round, each player is playing for 2 colors instead of 1. That's the key rule difference. And yeah, so that is the difference for 2 players. And if you're playing with a 3-player game, the main difference over there is obviously each one of the players is going to control 1 color. So let's say in a 3-player game, we might have somebody controlling red, somebody green, somebody blue, and yellow's not with any player. Whoever is the first player for a particular round will pick up, you know, the very first tile from the draw pile over here, look at it, and they will choose to put it down on a particular square. So the start player basically becomes sort of like a dummy 4th player in that particular variant. So those are the differences for a 2-player and a 3-player game. Scoring otherwise, again, everything else works pretty much the same way. There's a couple of variants that the game rulebook recommends as well, and you can try those out once you've played a few versions of the base game itself and you're a little bit comfortable with it. The first variant is one where instead of using this to determine sort of like the sequence that you're going with and sort of like which square is getting played out first, you can just forget all of this. You can choose to go which square you're going to. So the start player of the round will go to a particular square, put down their tile on it, do their turn, and then everybody else has to play on that same square at that point. And then, you know, the start player marker moves to the next one. The next player then chooses which square they're going to, and then everybody else is putting down their tiles in that square. So that's one where this is not needed, and the players get a choice in terms of which one they're going to. So that's the first variant. The second variant that the game also recommends is you're still using this one, but this is now face up. So everybody knows the sequence in which each one of these is going to be resolved. So you not only know the next one that's coming up, you also know the one after that and the one after that and the one after that. So this is the sequence of this is meant to be fully public information. So you can either play this out in any which way you want, but you know which ones are coming up after which one, and then you can plan your tiles and your placement accordingly. So those are the 2 variants that the game recommends as well, and they sound like, you know, fun ones. I would definitely try them out, and hopefully, yeah, that's pretty much it. Hopefully the rules teach made sense to you guys, and this helps you get the game to the table a lot faster than you otherwise may have been able to. It's a really fun game, and I do wish that the game had received a little bit more visibility and attention than it has, but hopefully this video helps bridge that somewhat. So hopefully give it a try. If you enjoyed the video, do give it a like and subscribe to our channel. And in the meanwhile, thanks for watching. Enjoy your game of Garum if you are able to get it to the table. And in the meanwhile, I'll see you in the next one. Take care.